There's a famous Scottish poem by Walter Wingate that will help us to understand what happens when we reward victimhood with status, as we were discussing in the last episode. It's called the Sur Finger. I had to learn this when I was about 9 years old as part of a school poetry recital competition, and generations of school children in Scotland have done the same thing. I don't know if they still do it, but if you ask any Scottish person of a certain age if they can recite the Sur Finger or the puddock, I'm sure they'll be able to do it. I'll recite the Scots version, but I'll put an English translation up on screen so you can read and understand what's going on here. And to get an idea, it's about a young boy called John who's got a splinter in his finger. Looking for some sympathy for this, he goes to his mum, and the poem is written from her perspective, and it goes like this. You've hurt your finger, poor wee man. Your pinky, dearie me. You had it up wide till I get my specs and see. My, so it is, and there's a skelf. You dinna greet me mair. See there, my needle's got into it. I'm sure that wasna sair. I knew to mak it hail him on, but on a wee bit saw, and tie a bonny hanky round. New there na, run awa. Your finger sair na, you rogue, you're only letting on. Wheel then, see new, there you are, browed up the same as John. So here's little Johnny, who's become the victim of a splinter in his finger. Oh no. He comes to show his mum, who very naturally begins to fuss over him. You've hurt your finger. Oh no. Oh dear, you poor thing. Just you hold it that way. I'll get the splinter out. I'll put some salve on it. I'll bandage it up all nice for you. In truth, she probably gives him more attention than the splinter really warrants, because splinters generally don't require bandages. But nevertheless, she just wants to indulge him, show him affection and love. Just fuss over him a little bit, basically. Now, somewhere in the background, there's this unnamed, presumably younger brother who's overhearing what's going on, and it's making him jealous. He wants that kind of love and affection from mum as well. And he thinks to himself, well, how do I get that? How do I get mum to fuss over me in the same way? He decides there's only one solution. If he wants to share in the same kind of affection and status as his brother, he's going to need the same kind of injury. And yet there's a catch here, because he doesn't actually have a sore finger. His finger is unfortunately splinter free. So he hatches a plan and decides there's only one thing for it. He's going to have to fake it. He walks into the room and the amateur dramatics begin. Me too, me too. He shouts, I've got a splinter in my finger as well. It's in such terrible pain. Oh, the pain, oh dear. Something like that. He grasps for victimhood because he wants to share in the love and affection and status that's being handed out for victimhood. Now, the mum, for her part, can clearly see there's nothing wrong with the younger brother, but because she understands his motivation, that he just wants to feel special like John, she decides to indulge him. She goes along with the charade, she panders to him, she pretends to take an imaginary splinter out of his finger, she puts some salve on it, she bandages him up, just the same as his brother. Now, this poem teaches us an essential truth about life, which is that when there is status, love, compassion, attention, sympathy, money, or indeed any kind of benefit available for victimhood, you're going to inspire people to rush to claim victimhood. Indeed, people will even fake victimhood if it means they get to share in some of these rewards. There's a law of economics which says whatever you subsidize, you will get more of. As we discussed in the last episode, when our society rewarded good character and achievement, we got more good character and more achievement. But now we're rewarding victimhood, now we're rewarding whinging and non-achievement, we're getting more victimhood, whinging, and non-achievement. And just as the brothers competed for the mum's compassion in this poem, there's a similar competition going on in society at large right now. People competing for status and affection by whinging as hard as they possibly can. The Me Too movement is a real-life example of the Sur Finger mechanism in action. In 2017, two journalists called Jodie Cantor and Megan Twohey, I think that's how you say that name, revealed they'd been sexually abused by the American film producer Harvey Weinstein. Now, these women were telling the truth about their victimhood. They were Johns, if you like, and therefore they were rightly showered with compassion for their ordeal. They were given status, they were offered media platforms where they could tell their stories, they were given a book deal, they were celebrated, feted, showered with compliments for their bravery in speaking up, and they, along with the rest of his genuine victims, were compensated financially from a fund totaling $17 million. Now, following these revelations, the actress Alyssa Milano encouraged women from all walks of life to share their own stories of sexual harassment on Twitter, now X of course, using the hashtag #MeToo. Many more genuine victims flooded forward, many more Johns, and they too were rightly given status, sympathy, compassion, a platform to tell their stories, and were showered with praise for their courage. In the passing of time, however, the younger brothers began to appear on the scene. Many women saw the benefits and the rewards that were being given to these victims and decided, do you know what? I'd quite like some of these things as well. Even though they were not genuine victims, they tried to paint themselves as though they were, so they could share in the benefits, the advantages, the rewards, and the status of victimhood. For example, some women claimed they were a victim of sexual harassment merely because a man had flirted with them clumsily. Me too, a man's flirted with me, how dare he? Some claimed they were a victim of sexual harassment because a man asked them out on a date more than once. In 2017, the Pulitzer Prize-winning writer Stephen Henderson was fired from his job at the Free Press merely because he made a couple of rejected passes at a co-worker outside of work. She claimed that it, quote unquote, made her uncomfortable, and therefore she was a victim of sexual harassment. Me too. And so Stephen Henderson lost his job. Other women claimed, and this notably led to a change of workplace policy at Netflix in 2018, that being looked at by a man for more than 5 seconds made them a victim of sexual harassment as well. So it began to get ludicrous, with all these younger brothers rushing onto the scene, hoping to share in the rewards of victimhood when really they didn't have much wrong with them at all. This is what's happening in the world more generally. Because intersectional theory has become so deep-rooted in our society, and because it rewards victims, there's a rush of people trying to position themselves as though they were victims even when they're not. It's a competition where those who whine and whinge and cry the loudest win the biggest prizes and get the most status. And so it's reduced large swathes of society, as I've said before, to behaving like toddlers, like adult toddlers. Have you ever seen toddlers getting into an argument, and when one begins to cry, the other suddenly realizes that if he doesn't cry too, the parents will assume that he's the villain and lavish comfort on his opponent. The one who cries the most gets the sympathy. So they enter into a crying match where each one tries to wail the loudest and pull a sadder face than the other, in the hope that when the mother inevitably rushes onto the scene, they will be seen as the one that's the victim, and they'll win the cuddles and the sympathy, and the other one will get told off. Well, that's a bit like what's happening under intersectional framework. Everyone trying to out-tantrum the others in order to claim the highest honors. And it gets very performative, it gets very showy, as everyone tries to show just how sad and beaten down and oppressed they are. There's a very old comedy sketch from the 1960s involving John Cleese and Graham Chapman of Monty Python fame. It's called the Four Yorkshiremen sketch, and it involves 4 characters talking about their impoverished childhoods. But as the conversation goes on, it turns into a competition, and the claims get increasingly exaggerated until they're just absolutely ludicrous. I'll play the clip, and you can see what I mean.
Who'd have thought 40 years ago that we'd be sitting here drinking Chateau de Chasselas?
I would have been glad of the price of a cup of tea then.
Ah, cup of cold tea.
Aye.
Without milk or sugar.
Or tea.
And out of a cracked cup at that. Yeah.
We never had a cup. We used to drink out of a rolled up newspaper. The best we could manage was to suck on a piece of damp cloth.
But you know, I often think we were happier then, although we were poor.
Because we were poor.
Aye.
My old dad said to me, he said, money won't bring you happiness, son.
He was right.
Aye.
I was happier then. I had nothing. We used to live in a tiny, tumble-down old house with great holes in the roof. House? You're lucky to have a house. We used to live in one room, 26 of us. All there. No furniture. Half the floor was missing, and we were all huddled in one corner for fear of falling.
Room? You were lucky to have a room. We used to have to live in corridor.
Corridor? Oh, I used to dream of living in a corridor. That would have been a palace to us. We used to live in a water tank on rubbish tip. Every morning we'd be woke up by having a load of rotting fish dumped on us. House.
Well, when I said house, I mean 'twere only hole in ground covered by a couple of foot of torn canvas. But it were house to us. Oh, well, we were evicted from our hole in the ground. We had to go and live in the lake.
Hey, you were lucky to have a lake. There were over 150 of us living in a small shoebox in the middle of the road.
Cardboard box?
Right.
Oh, you were lucky. We lived for 3 months in a rolled-up newspaper in a septic tank. Every morning we'd have to get up at 6, clean out rolled-up newspaper, eat a crust of stale bread, then we'd have to work 14 hours at mill, day in, day out, for sixpence a week. Aye, and then when we'd come home, Dad would thrash us to sleep with his belt.
Luxury. We used to get up at 3, clean the lake, eat a handful of hot gravel, then we'd work in mill for 20 hours for twopence a month, then we'd come home and Dad would beat us about the head and neck with a broken bottle. If we were lucky.
Paradise. We had it tough. I used to have to get out at shoebox at midnight, lick road clean, eat a couple of bits of cold gravel, work 23 hours a day at mill for a penny every 4 years, and when we got home, Dad used to slice us in half with a bread knife.
Right. We used to get up in morning at 10:30 at night, half an hour before we'd gone to bed, eat a lump of poison, work 29 hours a day at mill for a 8-year lifetime, come home and each night Dad would strangle us and dance about on our graves.
The instinct shown in that sketch is what we see in the postmodern age at large. Competitive victimhood, even going to extravagant lengths to concoct stories of oppression in order to seem the most victimized. Indeed, people are now so desperate to be victims of something that even when they aren't, they will deliberately try to manufacture it for themselves. They'll go into younger brother mode. Perhaps the best example I can think of here, because for a while it became something of a social media trend, was where young women would put on the most revealing clothing possible, go to the gym, record themselves working out, in the desperate hope that some man would interact with them, or at least just glance in their general direction. Because if anyone did, they would post a video to social media shouting, "Me too, me too. I too have been the victim of sexual harassment. A man looked at me in the gym." Can you believe it? Trying to manufacture victimhood for themselves, because that's what wins clicks like sympathy, compassion, fame, and social status. And here's the mistake that we are making. We are acting like the mum in the Sur Finger Poem, in the sense that we are rewarding the younger brothers with the attention that they crave for this behavior, even when they don't deserve it. We're not distinguishing between who actually deserves it and who doesn't. What we really need to do is say to the Johns, you get sympathy, you need this compassion. But what we need to say to the younger brothers is, enough of your nonsense. Grow up and stop whinging. There's nothing wrong with you. We're not distinguishing. And that's our mistake, because encouraging this rush for victimhood, it doesn't make for a productive, happy society full of good characters and high achievers. Instead, it produces a society of self-pitying toddlers who complain and throw temper tantrums to get their own way. A society of people without resilience and without good character. Intersectional theory has infantilized us.